I am in shock. I am in shock. The Indiana Fever just beat the Aces. The first win for the Indiana Fever against the Las Vegas Aces since I was 22 years old. Aces MVP to refs, Fever's MVP and Alyssa Smith. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You could almost feel the air leak out of the building. One long collective exhale as the scoreboard in Indianapolis froze on 81-54. For nearly half a decade, the Las Vegas Aces walked into every arena wearing the invisible armor of a back-to-back champion, the kind of aura that makes opponents doubt themselves before the opening tip. But on this sticky July night, the armor shattered into 38 bewildered shards of meteor red confetti, each one fluttering harmlessly to the hardwood. The dynasty that was supposed to be endless just absorbed a 27-point gut punch delivered by a team missing its superstar, and suddenly the WNBA's balance of power felt negotiable.
And Aja Whistle Wilson, my God, you see how many free throws that lady had? Oh my God, on the stat sheet she had basically 30 points, but all the free throws this woman got, man, they tried their best to keep the Aces in the game, man, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter, man. They destroyed the Aces. About freaking time the Fever finally beats the Aces, man. And without Caitlin Clark.
Switch the calendar back to 2019, and you'll find the last time the Indiana Fever tasted victory over Las Vegas. 16 meetings, 16 losses, a recurring nightmare that had turned every matchup into a foregone conclusion. Then came July 3rd, 2025. Kelsey Mitchell's jumper hummed through the net. Aliyah Boston raised a quiet fist, and the Fever never trailed again. The final margin, 81-54, snapped the 16-game drought and announced, without a hint of modesty, that the league's punching bag was done accepting bruises. It wasn't just the scoreboard, it was the body language. Vegas players searched for answers in one another's eyes, the way you look for phone service in a dead zone. Indiana jogged back on defense with the easy rhythm of a squad that finally believes its own scouting report. A streak fell, a weight lifted, and nobody in Gainbridge Fieldhouse pretended it was business as usual. Transition? But ending a drought was only the headline. The real jaw-dropper was who wasn't on the floor. Caitlin Clark's left groin strain, picked up on June 24th, has already cost her 5 straight games and a shot at playing in the Commissioner's Cup final. The Fever medical staff keeps labeling her day-to-day, but every afternoon the verdict is the same. Street clothes, light shooting, no live action. Fans groaned, rivals smirked. Yet the team that supposedly lived and died by its rookie phenom proceeded to rake in trophies and scalps without her. First came the Cup final in Minneapolis on July 1st. Natasha Howard's 16-point, 12-rebound double-double steered Indiana past the defending champ Lynx 74-59, sealing the franchise's first in-season title and stuffing roughly $43,000 into every Fever player's bank account. The locker room champagne sprayed so hard the social media clips still smell like Brute. But money wasn't the real windfall. Identity was. Without Clark's logo range gravity, Indiana rediscovered the hard-nosed blueprint Tamika Catchings once etched into franchise DNA. Swarm on defense, pound mismatches, share the sugar. The Cup win marked their 7th victory in 9 outings, and more importantly, proved they could close out a championship setting minus the league's biggest ratings magnet. Clark, meanwhile, kept impacting columns the box score can't touch. She roared from the bench, diagrammed sets on Gatorade cups, and still dominated headlines by becoming an all-star captain with a record 1.29 million fan votes, more than the top 30 vote-getters combined just 2 seasons ago. Even shelved, she magnified every camera angle, every ticket scan, every post-game think piece. So when the Aces rolled into Indianapolis on July 3rd, Vegas supporters figured the Clarkless Fever were due for a reality check. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell, Aliyah Boston, and a suddenly snarling defense folded the champs like cheap lawn chairs. By night's end, pundits were forced to ask the unthinkable. Is Indiana actually more dangerous after learning to win the hard way? The opening tip hadn't finished echoing off the rafters when Indiana struck 6 unanswered points that felt less like a run and more like a thunderclap. Kelsey Mitchell strolled into an elbow jumper. Aliyah Boston pick and popped a feathery 15-footer. And rookie Celeste Timpson ripped a steal for a breakaway lay-in that sent the Gainbridge crowd into a pogo stick frenzy. In barely 90 seconds, the defending champs trailed 6-0 and looked as if someone had swapped their scouting report for a grocery list. Vegas called timeout, but the breaks were gone. Indiana closed the first quarter up 21-14, shooting a breezy 53% while shrinking the paint on the other end until even Aliyah Wilson had to settle for mid-range bailouts. The Fever switched every off-ball screen, hedged the pick and roll just long enough to panic Chelsea Gray, then folded back into the lane like a concertina door. There, gone, shut. Wilson's face said it all. Frustration sewn to disbelief with a thread of mounting dread. The second quarter turned a controlled burn into an inferno. Indiana's bench stormed in with fresh legs and an attitude problem, stringing together a 12-2 burst that ripped the game open. Mitchell curled around a down screen, feet set, released textbook, and the net barely twitched. Sydney Colson tried to answer, but Timpson erased her layup at the glass, igniting a secondary break that finished with Boston bullying through 2 red jerseys for an and one. By the time the Aces huddled again, they were staring at an 18-point hole and a stat sheet that bordered on satire. 8 minutes into the frame, the Fever were a perfect 10 for 10 from inside 6 feet. Vegas, by contrast, was 2 for 11. Indiana's final shooting line for the quarter read like a video game cheat code. 81.8% from the field, 6 for 6 in the paint, 25 of 10 on the scoreboard. At halftime, the numbers sat there, practically humming. Fever 46, Aces 24. A 22-point deficit for a 2-time champion, carved by a roster supposedly waiting on its rookie savior to return. And none of it felt fluky. Indiana cut harder, talked louder, hustled longer. When Mitchell drilled a corner triple with 26 seconds left in the half, she floated back on defense, wagging a single finger as if to say, "This ends tonight." Across the floor, Becky Hammon folded her arms and stared at the hardwood as though it had betrayed her. Vegas looked for answers in the locker room. Indiana looked for oxygen, because everyone in blue seemed determined to sprint straight through the intermission. But the scoreboard wasn't the loudest statement of those first 20 minutes. No. That came a few possessions into the third, when a single whistle, or the lack of one, sent the entire arena into orbit. It started as the kind of rebound you practice in driveway drills. Lexi Hull slid under the rim, planted her hips, sealed off Aliyah Wilson, and rose for a clean two-handed grab. Textbook. Then, bang! Wilson launched herself over Hull's shoulders like a pole vaulter clearing the bar, yanked the ball free, and came down grinning. 99 times out of 100, the whistle sings over the back. Fever ball, play on. Not this time. The officials tapped their thumbs skyward. Jump ball. For a heartbeat, the arena froze in a confused hush, as if everybody needed a second to confirm what they just heard. Then, the roof rattled. Fans bellowed bogus until their voices cracked. On the Fever bench, Coach Stephanie White slapped her clipboard so hard the plastic echoed through courtside mics. On the Aces sideline, a few relieved smiles flickered. They knew they'd just caught a parachute in free fall. Twitter detonated in real time. Whistle Wilson trended nationwide within 2 minutes. Meme factories spitting out grainy slow-mos of the play with giant "See-mon, man" captions. Studio analysts scrambled for etiquette. Do you call out the refs mid-broadcast or wait until halftime? Even the seasoned color commentator, the guy who's seen everything twice, stumbled over his words. That's interesting. Back on the floor, Hull squared up for the jump like nothing had happened, but her clenched jaw told a different story. The toss went up, Wilson tipped it, Vegas secured possession, and missed a rushed baseline floater. Karma wearing blue tonight. But the whistle's damage wasn't done. The next 3 minutes turned into a parade of free throws, all for Wilson, who buried them with the practiced calm of someone accepting nature's rightful order. By night's end, she'd owned 13 trips to the stripe, 4 fewer than the entire Fever roster combined. Each swish felt like a scratch on a blackboard, a reminder that the line between superstar privilege and outright favoritism can blur under bright lights. Stephanie White finally snapped with 5:35 left, storming 2 steps onto the hardwood to vent her case. Technical foul, 1 shot, Vegas ball. White didn't care. She barked another sentence, turned, and pumped both fists at the crowd as the decibel meter spiked. Kelsey Mitchell and Aliyah Boston slapped hands behind her, feeding off the surge. Caitlin Clark, still in street clothes, leapt from her seat and waved a towel like she was flagging planes on a carrier deck. And here's the twist. That combustible moment, the one that could have cracked a young team's focus, detonated the other locker room instead. The Aces saw the door cracked open and panicked, firing up hurried threes, second-guessing reads, letting frustration seep into every pivot. The Fever? They turned White's technical into rocket fuel. Over the next 6 possessions, they forced 3 turnovers, ripped off an 8-0 spurt, and swelled the margin past 20 before Las Vegas even blinked. 1 controversial call, 2 wildly different reactions, and the scoreboard told you which response wins championships. Transition. But even a superstar's whistle and a string of charity-striped freebies couldn't disguise a colder truth. A'ja Wilson was fighting alone, and the cracks around her were starting to gape wider than anyone in red dared admit. A'ja Wilson walked onto the floor wearing that familiar quiet-fire expression. The look that usually preludes a 30-piece and a highlight reel dunk, sealed with a snarl. She nearly delivered too. Post spins, mid-post daggers, 11 trips to the stripe, 29 points on 50% shooting in a game where the nets felt welded shut for everyone else. If you glanced only at her stat line the next morning, you'd assume Vegas cruised. Reality? It was like watching a world-class conductor lead an orchestra in which every musician forgot their instrument at home. Let the numbers convict the ensemble. 7 for 43. That was every non-Wilson ace combined. 17%. If bricks were currency, they could have bought the league. 6 points, the second leading scorer. Not 6 boards, 6 points from Kelsey Plum, the same Plum who once rang up 30 on this very floor. 2 points, 5 turnovers. Chelsea Gray's night, 2. An all-star guard reduced to a reluctant facilitator who spent more time signaling, "my bad," than setting the table. 0 for 9 from deep outside of the lone make. Plum squeezed through late in garbage time. Each miss sounded heavier than the last, thudding against rim like a dropped hammer. Wilson kept demanding the ball. Left block, quick jab, soft hook score. Next trip down, the script repeated, only with one small difference. Indiana defenders stayed home on shooters, daring Gray, Plum, and Jackie Young to find their rhythm. They never did. Jackie Young, mired in a month-long funk, short-armed 2 wide-open corner threes so badly they barely kissed iron. Plum's drives died in a thicket of hands. Her patented scoop layup came down on the front rim and rolled off like it wanted no part of the embarrassment. Every errant shot hardened Wilson's shoulders a little more, her exhale growing louder, the bounce in her step draining teaspoon by teaspoon. By mid-third, a tension you could slice with a shot clock filled the Vegas huddle. Hand claps turned half-hearted, eye contact vanished. Wilson crouched with a towel draped over her head, staring at the floor like she was searching for an escape hatch, and the fever smelled blood. Indiana loaded 2 defenders on Wilson's catch, forced her to kick out, then fanned out to the arc, where the aces clanked open threes. On the other side, Kelsey Mitchell pirouetted into floaters, Aliyah Boston dissected single coverage, and Natasha Howard slid behind an overhelping defender for easy finishes. That scoreboard gap swelled from uncomfortable to humiliating in 4 possessions. Becky Hammond tried everything. She yanked Gray after her 3rd straight turnover, plugged in Sydney Colson to inject pace, screamed spread and move until her voice frayed. Nothing stuck. Vegas kept wheeling the ball back to Wilson like she was both hammer and anvil. Only the fever had forged a steel wall around her. The dagger came with 8:41 left. Wilson muscled through Boston, deposited a left-hand lay-in plus the whistle, pumped her fist and roared, "Let's go!" The free throw cut it to 19, close enough to fantasize. But Indiana answered with a 9-0 blitz. Mitchell transition 3, Boston drop-step bucket, Timpson chase down block leading to a Howard and 1. 19 ballooned to 28 in 97 seconds. Wilson's shoulders slumped. Gray wiped sweat from her eyes and stared at the floor scoreboard, lips pressed tight. On the broadcast, the analyst's voice dropped to a near whisper. If your MVP can't save you, nobody's coming through that door. Wilson finished her night on the bench, chewing her mouthguard. Expression unreadable. The final horn registered 81-54, but the sound you remember is that stubborn echo of a soloist left to outsing a choir that forgot its parts. Kelsey "Money Mitch" Mitchell carved the aces for 25 points and 6 helpers, sprinting off ball screens like a pinball with a purpose. Aliyah Boston unfurled a clinic in patience, drop steps, soft hooks, outlet darts. Finishing with 20 and 7, Natasha Howard muscled an 11-10 double-double, flashing the same edge that earned her the Cup MVP. And somewhere in the forest of arms, rookie wing Celeste Timpson delivered chase-down blocks that made seasoned Aces shooters double-clutch midair. Here's the stat that glitters: 24 assists on 31 makes, elite connectivity that turned the hardwood into one big passing lane. Vegas coughed up 17 turnovers, many gift-wrapped by fever hands darting into pockets like seasoned pickpockets. If the game's turning point had a decibel rating, it spiked with 5 of 35 left in the third when Stephanie White finally let her simmering frustration boil over. For 2 quarters, she'd paced the sideline with clipped words and clenched fists, jaw tight every time a questionable whistle nudged the Aces closer. But when a delayed foul call wiped away a Mitchell layup, the dam burst. White slammed a palm against the scorer's table. Twack! then strode 2 full steps onto the hardwood, voice slicing through the arena buzz. Her message wasn't printable, but everyone understood the translation. That's the last free pass you're giving Vegas tonight. The nearest official turned, twirled 2 fingers, and raised a single index. Technical foul. 1 free throw, plus the ball. In most gyms, that's the cue for a collective groan. Gainbridge Fieldhouse erupted instead. Fans pounded seats, the mascot spun a towel like a windmill, and a wave of blue-clad disbelief morphed into something else entirely, adrenaline. White spun back toward her bench, clapped once, and barked, "Next play!" The clipped command landed like a starter's pistol. Kelsey Mitchell slapped Aliyah Boston's forearm so hard the crack echoed. Natasha Howard balled both fists and flexed at midcourt. Rookie Celeste Timpson looked almost insulted by the stoppage, tapping her chest as if to say, "Give me the inbound and move." On the sideline, Caitlin Clark leapt out of her folding chair, hair flying, towel whipping overhead in wide arcs. She cupped her hands megaphone style and shouted praise into the huddle. No play call, no scheme chatter, just raw enthusiasm poured straight into teammates' ears. Fans at home got a split-screen treat, the ref marking the technical, and Clark on the bench mouthing, "Let's go," with all the conviction of a quarterback who just engineered a game-winning drive, even though she'd yet to log a single second in uniform. For a generation of young viewers, it was a masterclass in sideline leadership, influence when you can't impact the box score. The immediate cost of White's eruption, 1 made free throw, was pocket change. The payoff came in the next 6 possessions. Indiana's defense became a net of synced limbs. Timpson swallowed a plum runner at the rim. Hull dived onto the floor to pry loose a 50-50 ball. Mitchell intercepted a lazy skip pass and cashed a transition 3 that jolted the crowd so hard the broadcast mics clipped. By the time the Aces blinked, a 19-point gap had ballooned past 25, and the running commentary turned from "Can Vegas rally?" to "How ugly might this get?" Across the court, the reigning champs looked shell-shocked. Becky Hammon raised both palms at her players in an urgent calm down gesture, but the body language said the opposite. Chelsea Gray stared toward the rafters as if searching for an answer key. Aja Wilson, hands on hips, walked to the free throw line alone, bounced the ball once, and exhaled so deeply her shoulders sagged 2 inches. Meanwhile, the Fever bench performed a choreographed celebration after every stop. 3 quick stomps, a shimmy, and back to their seats before the officials could object. Timpson spiked an imaginary volleyball after blocking a Coulson floater. Erica Wheeler mimed fanning Mitchell with invisible palm leaves when Money Mitch drilled her 4th tray. It was exuberant, yes, but never taunting. More like a team discovering how fun dominance can feel when everyone carries a piece of the load. White's outburst also exposed a subtle truth. This locker room trusts her thermometer. When she spikes, they burn hotter. When she cools, they drop into ice and veins execution. Moments after the tech, she pulled Mitchell aside, tapped her own temple twice, and quietly mouthed, "Smart now." Mitchell nodded, tugged her jersey, and on the very next trip, whipped a skip pass to Hull for a textbook backdoor layup. Fire and ice, one after the other, perfectly timed. By quarter's end, the crowd chant switched from the rhythmic "Fever" to a taunting "Overrated," aimed at the defending champs. A chant that, for years, had been a punchline whispered about Indiana instead. Clark cupped a hand to her ear, grinning. Even on the sidelines, she understood the symbolism. Roles were reversing in real time. When the horn finally ended the period, White summoned her players into a tight semicircle. No clipboard, no X's and O's, just a single sentence delivered so softly the boom mic only caught fragments. Keep sending the message. Heads bobbed, gloves were back on, focus recentered. When the 4th quarter began, the scoreboard already showed a blowout. But Indiana refused to coast. They tightened every switch, finished every cut, and dribbled with the quiet certainty of a team that already knew the ending. On the first possession, Kelsey Mitchell curled off a screen, splashed a 15-footer, and tapped 3 fingers to her temple on the jog back. Aliyah Boston followed with a block on Aja Wilson. Yes, that Aja Wilson. Then sprinted the floor for a trailing lay-in that pushed the gap past 25. The reigning champs searched for momentum, but the building had changed its mind about royalty. Body language told the story. Vegas, drooping shoulders, hands on hips, eyes darting to the clock. Fever, lifted chins, bench dancing, every reserve clapping in rhythm. That contrast delivered the headline more clearly than any stat line. The Aces were surviving, the Fever were ascending. With the win secure, Stephanie White emptied the bench and the identity stayed the same. Second unit guards swung the ball side to side, rookies hedged screens exactly as starters had, and the margin never wobbled. When the horn sounded 81-54, the arena didn't roar. It exhaled, the way you do when a truth finally settles. The league's balance of power just tilted. Las Vegas, once a sure-thing dynasty, slipped below 500, their aura cracking with every hurried jumper. Indiana, fresh off a Commissioner's Cup triumph and now riding a 7-of-9 surge, rose above the playoff cut without its headline star. The Fever learned to win gritty and together while Caitlin Clark waved towels in warm-ups. Imagine what happens when she returns. Groin healed, range unlocked, vision carving new angles no scouting report can predict. A warning now echoes for every locker room in the WNBA. If you struggled with Indiana's defense and 24 assists, wait until the league's top vote-getter re-enters the lineup. Dynasties don't disappear overnight, but hierarchies can shuffle in a single, unforgettable game. On July 3rd, an 81-54 gut check redrew the map. The Aces are no longer the summit, just another peak to climb. The Fever didn't ask permission to join the elite. They marched in, posted a banner, and saved a front-row seat for the rookie still lacing her sneakers. Welcome to the new WNBA order. 5 beats 1, and Indiana just proved it. The scoreboard showed 81-54, but the real numbers that mattered were buried in the details. 24 assists on 31 makes, 17 forced turnovers, and one superstar cheering in street clothes while her teammates dismantled a dynasty. Indiana's victory over Las Vegas wasn't just a single upset. It exposed how quickly balance shifts when 5 players trust the pass more than the whistle. For the Aces, the lesson is blunt. A'ja Wilson can be brilliant, yet brilliance fades when the rest of the roster stalls at midcourt. For the Fever, the takeaway is electric. They now own proof that defense and shared offense travel, even without the long-range gravity of Caitlin Clark. So the question lingers beyond the buzzer. What happens when the league's top vote-getter steps back onto a floor already humming with new confidence? One game has redrawn expectations, but the season still holds the ink. Parity is here, momentum is wearing navy and gold, and every contender has a fresh benchmark to chase. If 5 disciplined voices can drown out a single superstar, imagine the noise when that superstar returns with a full chorus behind her. The hierarchy has changed. The next verse of the season will decide whether it stays that way or gets rewritten again.